Chapter 1: The Subtle Shift. Marcus Blackwood had built his life the same way he built his houses, measured, reinforced, and without wasted motion. At 38, he moved with the same disciplined precision that had once carried him through desert heat in a Marine uniform. Broad-shouldered, quiet, deliberate, his construction company had grown from a two-man renovation crew into a respected regional operation. Commercial projects, custom homes, government contracts. His name carried weight. He believed in structure, in foundations, in things that didn't collapse under pressure. That included his marriage, or at least it had. The shift didn't happen all at once. It never does. It began in small details, the kind most men ignore. Victoria started waking up earlier. Marcus would hear the shower before his alarm went off. At first, he smiled at it. Maybe she was trying to impress him. Maybe she wanted to look sharp for work. But then came the makeup, not the soft, effortless look she used to wear. This was precise, intentional, lipstick chosen carefully, blouse pressed to perfection. He watched her one morning from the doorway, leaning against the frame as she adjusted her earrings. "You got a board meeting?" he asked casually. She startled just slightly. "No, just a presentation. You look like you're pitching to Congress." She laughed. "Too quick, too light." "Maybe I am." Marcus smiled, but something registered. Marines are trained to notice changes in terrain, changes in posture, changes in breathing. Something had shifted. He didn't say anything. Instead, he started watching. Victoria had never been secretive with her phone. It used to lie face up on the kitchen counter. Now it was always face down. Screen brightness dimmed. Notifications silenced. One evening, they were watching television when it buzzed. She glanced at it and subtly turned the screen away. "Work?" Marcus asked. "Yeah." "At 8:30? She shrugged. "Deadlines don't sleep." He nodded. Neither did suspicion. Later that night, Marcus woke up to the faint glow of light under the bedroom door. He checked the clock. 12:47 a.m. He stepped quietly into the hallway. Victoria was on the couch, phone in hand, fingers moving quickly across the screen. When she noticed him, she flinched again. "Can't sleep," she said. "You texting your insomnia away?" She gave him a look, sharp this time. "It's work, Marcus." He held her gaze for a second longer than usual. Then he walked back to bed. He didn't confront. He cataloged. Over the next few weeks, the distance grew. Physical at first, she no longer leaned into him on the couch, no longer rested her hand on his thigh while driving. Intimacy became mechanical, scheduled, detached. He noticed she started going to tennis twice a week. Victoria had never liked tennis. "You finally getting athletic on me?" he asked one Saturday morning as she tied her sneakers. She smirked. "Maybe I'm tired of being the least competitive person in this house." That's supposed to be a shot. If the shoe fits. He watched her leave. The scent of a new perfume lingered behind. Marcus didn't follow her. He went to work. Because Marcus Blackwood never chased chaos. He waited for it to reveal itself. The barbecue happened on a Sunday afternoon. The neighborhood had always been tight-knit. Families, kids on bikes, retired couples who knew everyone's business before breakfast. Marcus stood near the grill, turning ribs with methodical focus. The heat didn't bother him. He'd worked under worse. "Marcus," old Tom Reynolds called out, waddling over with a beer in hand. "Your wife's got a mean backhand." Marcus looked up slowly. "Excuse me?" Tom chuckled. "Tennis. Saw her last Thursday at the country club courts." That Johnson fellow was barely keeping up. Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Johnson? Yeah, Richard Johnson. Sharp dresser. Corporate type. Drives that silver Mercedes." Marcus flipped a rib. Sizzle. "Smoke." Didn't know she'd picked up tennis. "Oh yeah," Tom said. "They've been playing a lot. Almost every week." Almost every week. Behind him, Linda Harper chimed in while arranging potato salad. They grabbed lunch afterward, too. Cute pair. Power duo. Marcus's jaw tightened, but only slightly. "Power duo," he repeated. "You know," Linda said, lowering her voice like she was sharing gossip. "Ambitious professionals." She's always laughing around him. Marcus forced a smile. Victoria laughs around everyone. Linda tilted her head. "Not like that." The words hung in the air. Marcus took a slow breath. Inhale. Exhale. The Marine in him had learned something long ago. Emotion clouds tactical clarity. So he asked lightly, "They work closely?" "Oh yes," Tom replied. "He's been consulting at her firm for months now. Practically attached at the hip." Months. Victoria had never mentioned that. Marcus's eyes scanned the yard. Children playing tag. Music humming softly from a speaker. Sunlight reflecting off polished cars. Normal. Peaceful. But something underneath had shifted. He handed Tom a plate of ribs. "Appreciate the heads up," he said evenly. Tom blinked. "Heads up. About her tennis improvement." Tom laughed again, oblivious. Marcus walked toward the cooler, every step measured. He wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger is loud. What he felt was quieter. A fracture. That evening, Victoria returned from tennis glowing. Slight flush in her cheeks. Hair tied loosely, strands falling around her face. "You missed a good match," she said breezily. "Who won?" She hesitated, just a fraction. "I did. Against just a colleague." Marcus nodded slowly. "Richard Johnson?" he asked calmly. The air changed. She recovered quickly. "Tom talks too much." "So it was him." "It's not a secret, Marcus. We work together. And lunch." "What about lunch? Do you eat alone?" She folded her arms. Defensive now. "Are you interrogating me?" "No." He stepped closer, but his voice remained steady. "I'm observing." She scoffed. "God, you're paranoid." Maybe. Or maybe he was trained. He didn't push further. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't accuse. Instead, he kissed her forehead lightly and walked upstairs. Victoria stood there for a moment, unsettled, not by anger, but by restraint. Marcus closed the bedroom door behind him and sat on the edge of the bed. His breathing was steady, his pulse controlled, but inside, something had cracked. Not shattered, just cracked. And Marcus Blackwood understood something about cracks. If you ignore them, they spread. If you study them, you find their origin. He would not confront without proof. He would not accuse without certainty. He would observe and wait. Downstairs, Victoria's phone buzzed again. Marcus heard it. He didn't move. But for the first time in 8 years of marriage, a quiet thought formed in his mind. Something is wrong. And he would find out exactly what it was. Right there, and nowhere further. Chapter 2, Arrogance and Disrespect. The change of Victoria didn't explode. It sharpened, like a blade being honed slowly against stone. Marcus noticed it first in her tone. They were seated at the dining table one Thursday evening, plates half finished, the television murmuring softly in the background. Marcus had just finished describing a commercial contract he secured, a municipal redevelopment project that would keep his crews busy for 18 months. "It's a big one," he said evenly. "City contract. Multi-phase build." Victoria swirled her wine and didn't look impressed. "That's nice," she replied. "Concrete and scaffolding again?" Marcus met her eyes. "It's infrastructure." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound glamorous." "It feeds 27 families," he said calmly. She leaned back in her chair. "I just mean, don't you ever want more? Bigger conversations? Bigger rooms?" Marcus folded his napkin carefully. "Bigger than what?" "Boardrooms," she said. "Corporate strategy. Expansion at scale." Richard was explaining. There it was. Richard. Marcus kept his expression neutral. Explaining what? How real power works. It's not about pouring foundations. It's about controlling markets. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest. He didn't show it. "My crews built the office tower you work in." Victoria rolled her eyes. "You're being defensive." "I'm stating facts." She gave him a thin smile. "You're insecure." The word landed softly, but carried weight. "Insecure about what?" he asked. "About the fact that I work in a world you don't understand." Marcus leaned back now, studying her. The confidence in her voice wasn't just new, it was borrowed. "And what world is that?" he asked quietly. She hesitated just long enough. "Richard's been mentoring me," she said. "He sees potential." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'm glad someone does," he replied. She missed the edge in his tone, or ignored it. The comments continued over the next week. Small, dismissive. He came home with dust on his boots one afternoon, and she wrinkled her nose slightly. "You could at least change before sitting on the couch." "I just walked in." "Still, presentation matters." He stared at her. Since when? Since I started realizing we don't live in a construction zone. Marcus removed his boots silently and carried them to the garage. He'd survived combat zones. He could survive this. But humiliation simmered quietly beneath his composure. One evening, she was getting dressed for what she called a late strategy session. Black dress, heels, the new perfume again. Strategy at 8 p.m.? Marcus asked from the doorway. She didn't turn around. High-level discussions don't fit into 9-to-5 schedules. With Richard, she met his eyes in the mirror. He's just a colleague. You spent a lot of time with him. You're keeping score now? I'm observing patterns. She sighed dramatically. God, Marcus, you sound paranoid. Do I? Yes, you do. She grabbed her purse. Maybe you're threatened, she added casually, by someone who thinks bigger. Marcus stepped aside to let her pass. Drive safe, he said evenly. The door closed behind her. He stood in the silence for a long time. Then he walked to his office. Marcus didn't confront without preparation. That was rule one. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and logged into the phone account. The access had always been shared. Transparency had never been an issue before. Until now, he downloaded the detailed call logs. Richard Johnson's number appeared frequently. Late evenings, early mornings, lunch hours, long durations. Marcus stared at the screen. He felt nothing outwardly. Inside, something tightened. He printed the records and placed them in a folder. No accusations yet, just facts. The next layer came quietly. Marcus handled most of the household finances. Victoria had her own corporate accounts, but their joint account covered major expenses. One Saturday morning, while she was at tennis, Marcus reviewed recent transactions. There were transfers he didn't recognize. Small at first, then larger. 5,000, 12,000, 20. Transferred into an unfamiliar account labeled only with initials. R.J. Marcus leaned back in his chair. R.J. Richard Johnson. He didn't jump to conclusions. He opened the business ledger next. Victoria had occasional authorization to access certain company files for tax coordination. There were 2 late-night login timestamps from her credentials. After midnight, he hadn't authorized that. Marcus inhaled slowly. Exhale. He picked up his phone and called his accountant. Hey, Marcus said calmly. I need a review on internal transfers for the last quarter. Everything okay? The accountant asked. Just tightening procedures. That's new. Not really, Marcus replied. Just being thorough. He ended the call. He wasn't furious. He was focused. That evening, Victoria returned home laughing at something on her phone. Good night, Marcus asked. She didn't look up. Productive. With Richard. She finally met his gaze. Yes, with Richard. Is that a problem? Depends. On what? On whether your productivity involves our bank account. Her eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means I noticed transfers. She scoffed. Oh my God, you went through our accounts. I manage them. You're unbelievable. Are you sending him money? Her expression hardened. You don't trust me. Answer the question. She crossed her arms. He needed help bridging an investment temporarily. How much? That's none of your business. It's absolutely my business. She stepped closer, voice rising slightly. You're being insecure. Richard operates at a different level. Investments. Ventures. You wouldn't understand. Marcus's jaw tightened. Try me. He's building something bigger than houses, Marcus. And you're funding it? It's temporary. With what guarantee? She laughed softly. You think so small. And you think recklessly. Her face flushed. He believes in me. In my ambition. You're stuck in dirt and cement. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, he's just a colleague, right? Yes. And you're risking our finances for him. She turned away. You're twisting this. No, Marcus said calmly. I'm clarifying it. Silence filled the room. Her phone buzzed again. She checked it instantly. Marcus watched. That reflex told him more than her words ever could. He didn't argue further. He didn't shout. He walked back to his office and closed the door. Inside, he opened a new spreadsheet. Phone logs, bank transfers, login timestamps. He began compiling everything, line by line, date by date, precision over emotion. Humiliation simmered beneath his composure, but it did not control him. Victoria believed he was insecure. She believed Richard was superior. She believed she was smarter. Marcus Blackwood simply kept gathering information, and he noticed the transfers were increasing. Chapter 3: The Anniversary Ambush. Marcus made the reservation himself. 8 years of marriage deserved intention. Or at least, that was what he told himself as he adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal suit and checked the time. Victoria had texted earlier. Running late. Don't start without me. He hadn't. The dining room glowed under soft amber lighting. Candles flickered against polished glass. Their home, large, immaculate, architecturally precise, felt almost staged tonight. Marcus had arranged everything deliberately. Steak resting beneath silver domes. A bottle of aged red breathing on the counter. Music low and smooth in the background. 8 years. He remembered their first anniversary in a cramped apartment with folding chairs and cheap champagne. Back then, Victoria had laughed easily. Back then, ambition hadn't come with contempt. The front door opened at 7:42 p.m. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. Marcus turned. She was dressed in deep red. Elegant. Confident. Not the warmth of a wife celebrating a milestone, but the precision of someone arriving for a performance. "You look beautiful," he said evenly. She tilted her head. "I know." The arrogance was subtle, but present. She placed her purse down and surveyed the table. "You went all out. It's our anniversary." She gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Right." They sat across from each other. Marcus poured wine. "To 8 years," he said calmly. Victoria didn't raise her glass immediately. Instead, she reached into her purse. The folder she pulled out was thick, crisp, professional. She slid it across the table. Marcus didn't touch it first. "What's this?" he asked. Her lips curved slowly. "Your gift." Silence stretched between them. He opened the folder. Divorce papers. Prepared. Filed. Structured. Marcus read the first page without visible reaction. The air felt heavier, but he did not move. Victoria leaned back, watching him carefully. "Say something," she said. He closed the folder gently. "You've been busy." "I have." "With Richard?" he asked calmly. She didn't flinch this time. "Yes." The word dropped clean and sharp. "I've been seeing him for months," she continued. "And before you ask, yes. It's serious." Marcus studied her face. There was no guilt, no hesitation, just a strange thrill in her eyes. "You planned this for tonight?" he asked. "Timing matters," she replied smoothly. "Symbolism." He nodded slowly. "Symbolism." Victoria stood and walked around the table, heels echoing like deliberate punctuation. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You deserve honesty," she said. "I've outgrown this life." This life. Yes. The dust. The small-town mentality. The construction stories. Marcus remained seated. "I built this house," he said quietly. "And Richard builds empires." There was again. "Richard." Marcus folded his hands on the table. "And you're leaving tonight?" he asked. "Oh, I'm leaving," she said. "But not before I make something very clear." She walked closer. "You never satisfied me, Marcus." He didn't blink. "You tried," she continued, almost amused. "But you lack imagination." The insult hung there. "He doesn't." Marcus said nothing. Victoria's smirk deepened. "In fact," she added casually, "he's coming over." Marcus's eyes lifted slowly. "Tonight?" "Yes." She walked back to the table and picked up her wine glass. "I thought it would be educational." "Educational." She nodded. "You can watch. Learn what a real man does." The words were designed to cut. "To show you exactly why I'm leaving." Marcus stood now, not abruptly, not violently, just enough to level their eye line. "You invited him here," he said evenly. "I did." "For what?" Victoria smiled wider. "For a lesson." Silence. The kind that hums beneath the surface. She expected something. Rage. A slam glass. A shout. Instead, Marcus adjusted his cuff. "You've become bold," he observed. "I've become honest. You're humiliating yourself." She laughed lightly. "No, Marcus. I'm humiliating you." He walked toward her slowly. "Does he know you funded him?" Marcus asked quietly. Her smile faltered, just for a fraction. That's irrelevant. Is it? You're deflecting. He nodded once. Possibly. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. You know what your problem is? You think silence is strength. It's not. It's weakness. He looked at her carefully. You think noise is power, he replied. It is. Not always. She rolled her eyes. You still don't get it. A knock would have been too polite. The sound that cut through the room was sharper. The doorbell. Victoria's expression shifted into satisfaction. Right on time, she said softly. Marcus didn't turn toward the door. Instead, he looked directly at her. If that man steps inside my house, he said calmly, voice low and controlled, I will end this permanently. Victoria's smirk didn't fade. You don't scare me. The doorbell rang again. Chapter 4, Lockdown. The doorbell echoed again. Sharp, insistent. Victoria's lips curved with anticipation. Go on, she said softly. Answer it. Marcus didn't move toward the door. Instead, he reached calmly into his suit jacket. Victoria frowned slightly. What are you doing? He pulled out a small black remote. Sleek, matte, unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what it controlled. Marcus looked at her one last time before pressing a single button. The sound that followed was not subtle. A heavy metallic slide thundered through the house. Victoria jumped. What was that? Another grinding noise rolled across the walls. Deep, mechanical, final. The steel security shutters began descending over every window in the house. One by one, the warm candlelight shifted as the outside world disappeared behind reinforced metal. Victoria's confidence flickered. Marcus, what are you doing? He didn't answer immediately. He pressed another button. A series of sharp clicks echoed through the halls. Deadbolts engaged. Magnetic locks sealed. Every exterior door in the house locked automatically. The doorbell stopped ringing. Silence fell. Victoria's voice lost its earlier edge. This isn't funny. Marcus placed the remote gently on the table. I don't joke about security. She moved toward the front hallway, heels striking the marble faster now. The front door was already open. Richard Johnson was standing just inside. Tall, polished, expensive suit, smug confidence. But that confidence wavered as the shutters finished slamming down behind him. What the hell is this? Richard asked, glancing around. Marcus walked forward slowly. You're already inside, he said calmly. Victoria turned toward Marcus sharply. You said if he stepped into this house, I said I would end this. His voice was steady, controlled. Richard scoffed lightly. Is this some intimidation tactic? Marcus ignored him. Instead, he walked to the far wall of the living room and tapped a panel mounted near the fireplace. The wall changed. Hidden screens powered on, sliding silently into place. Large monitors illuminated the room. Camera feeds. Front yard. Backyard. Garage. Interior hallways. Every angle. Richard's smirk faded. Victoria stared at the screens. You've been recording? She whispered. I've been securing, Marcus corrected. One of the monitors zoomed automatically to the front gate. A timestamp appeared in the corner. Victoria swallowed. What is this, Marcus? Insurance. Richard stepped forward, trying to reclaim control. Look, whatever this is, I'm not interested in playing your little dominance game. Marcus turned to him slowly. You thought tonight was your game. Silence. Victoria's eyes moved between them. Stop it. Both of you. Marcus picked up the remote again. Another press. The interior hallway lights dimmed slightly, leaving the living room illuminated under a colder, whiter glow from the monitors. Richard shifted his stance. Unlock the doors, he said. This is ridiculous. They will unlock, Marcus replied, when I decide. Victoria's breathing became shallower. This is illegal. No, Marcus said calmly. This is private property. Richard glanced toward the door again. The heavy steel covering the windows reflected his own uneasy expression. You planned this, Victoria said slowly. Marcus met her eyes. Yes. The word landed heavier than any shout. You knew? She whispered. I observed. For how long? Her voice tightened. Long enough. Richard attempted to laugh it off. This is insane. You think this changes anything? She doesn't want you. Marcus didn't respond to the bait. Instead, he walked to a side cabinet and opened it. Inside were 3 thick folders, neatly labeled. Victoria felt her stomach tighten. "What is that?" she asked. Marcus carried the folders to the table and placed them down one by one. Thud, thud, thud. "You thought tonight was an ambush," he said quietly. "It isn't." Victoria shook her head slowly. "Marcus, you underestimated me." Richard's jaw flexed. "You don't scare me." "I'm not trying to," Marcus replied. He picked up a tablet from the table and tapped the screen. One of the monitors changed. Footage appeared. Richard entering the neighborhood multiple times over the past month. Timestamps, vehicle plates, zoomed images. Victoria's car parked beside his. Lunch locations, hotel entrances. Richard's face drained of color. "You had someone follow me?" he demanded. "I didn't need to." Marcus zoomed the image further. "Your arrogance did most of the work." Victoria stepped back slowly. "You went through my phone," she said. "No," Marcus answered calmly. "You left patterns." The temperature in the room felt colder. The candles had burned low, forgotten. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. "This is extreme," she said. "You're overreacting." Marcus looked at her steadily. "You brought a man into my house." "You invited him here," she shot back, trying to regain footing. "No," Marcus said quietly. "You did." Richard attempted to move toward the hallway. The motion sensor lights activated instantly, bright and clinical. Every step he took was captured on 3 different screens. "You're not leaving yet," Marcus said evenly. Richard stopped. Victoria's voice trembled now. "Marcus, what are you going to do?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at both of them, measured, calm, utterly composed. "You thought I would lose control," he said. Neither of them responded. "You thought I would shout, swing, break something." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "I don't break," Marcus continued. "I prepare." Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out. "You've been planning this," she whispered. "Yes." "For how long?" she asked again, fear now unmistakable. Marcus held her gaze. "Long enough." And the power in the room had completely changed hands. Right there. Exactly there. Chapter 5, Folder 1. Affairs. The house was silent except for the low hum of electronics and the faint ticking of the dining room clock. Marcus stood at the head of the table. Victoria remained frozen near the fireplace, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Richard stood stiffly by the hallway entrance, trying to look composed, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. Marcus placed his hand on the first folder. Plain, cream-colored, neatly labeled. Folder 1. He opened it without drama. Inside were photographs, printed on high-quality paper, organized chronologically. He slid the first photo across the table toward Richard. A hotel entrance. Date and timestamp in the corner. Richard stepping out of his silver Mercedes. Not alone. Victoria leaned forward before she could stop herself. "Who is that?" she asked. Richard didn't answer. Marcus slid the second photo forward. The same hotel lobby. Richard's hand resting at the lower back of a woman Victoria didn't recognize. Wedding ring visible on her finger. Victoria's breathing grew shallow. "This is doctored," Richard said quickly. "You can manipulate anything these days." Marcus didn't respond. He simply pulled out a third image. Different date, different hotel, different woman, same pattern, hand placement, smile, proximity. Victoria's eyes moved rapidly between the images. Marcus turned another page. A surveillance still from a restaurant patio. Richard leaning across a table, whispering into the ear of a blonde woman. "Timestamp. 3 months ago." Victoria whispered. "That was when you told me you were at a conference." Richard's voice sharpened. "I was." Marcus spoke evenly. "The conference was 2 cities over." Richard's eyes snapped toward him. "You've been stalking me." "I've been observing," Marcus corrected. He reached into the folder again and pulled out a USB drive. He walked to the media console and inserted it into the system. One of the large monitors flickered. Security footage appeared. A hotel hallway. Camera angle from the ceiling. Richard exiting a room at 11:47 p.m. He adjusted his tie and checked his phone. The door behind him opened seconds later. A brunette stepped out. Victoria stepped backward, as if the image had physically struck her. "This doesn't prove anything," Richard said quickly. We had separate rooms. Marcus pressed a button. The footage advanced. Same hallway. Same door. Richard entering that room earlier at 9:12 p.m. Victoria's hands began to tremble. That's just one, Marcus said calmly. He returned to the table and opened the next divider in the folder. For separate sections, each labeled with a different woman's first name. Victoria's name was not among them. She stared at the labels. Who are they? She asked, her voice thin. Married, Marcus replied. Richard's composure cracked slightly. You have no right. I have every right. Marcus interrupted, his tone still level. You brought this into my home. He handed Victoria another photo. Richard on a beach resort balcony, arm wrapped around a woman in a silk robe. Time-stamped during the same week Victoria had told Marcus she was attending a corporate retreat. Victoria looked at Richard slowly. You said you were alone. Richard exhaled sharply. Victoria, don't be naive. He's manipulating you. Marcus leaned against the table. I haven't started manipulating anyone. He pulled out printed phone logs. Highlighted. Different numbers. Late-night calls. Repeated patterns. Richard's name connected to each woman through overlapping time frames. You're not exclusive, Marcus said quietly. Richard's nostrils flared. This is harassment. Marcus ignored him and pressed play on another file. Audio filled the room. Richard's voice. Smooth. Confident. You're not like the others, the recording said. You're different. The woman's soft laugh followed. Victoria's face went pale. Marcus skipped forward. A second recording. Richard again. You deserve better than your husband. Victoria's lips parted. That's what you told me, she whispered. Richard's jaw tightened. Everyone says things. Marcus's gaze never left him. You told each of them the same thing. Victoria looked back at the folder. There were text message transcripts printed neatly. Identical compliments. Identical promises. Identical future plans. Victoria's name appeared in a fifth section now, recently added. Her eyes darted up at Marcus. You label me, she said weakly. I categorize behavior, he replied. Richard stepped forward angrily. This proves nothing. Adults can have relationships. With married women? Marcus asked calmly. Silence. Marcus slid the final set of documents across the table. Printed emails. Short. Direct. Sent from anonymous accounts. Subject lines. Your wife deserves the truth. Victoria blinked. What are those? Marcus met Richard's eyes. Other husbands, he said. Richard's face lost all color. Victoria's voice shook. You told them. I provided information, Marcus replied evenly. You ruin lives. Richard snapped. Marcus's expression didn't change. You did. The weight of that sentence settled heavily in the room. Victoria turned slowly toward Richard. How many? She whispered. Richard didn't answer. How many? She repeated louder. He ran a hand through his hair. You're overreacting. She let out a soft, broken laugh. I thought I was special. Marcus watched her carefully. Richard stepped closer to her. You are. No, Marcus said quietly. She isn't. Victoria looked at him sharply. You were a pattern, Marcus continued. A target. Financially stable. Ambitious. Married. Predictable. Victoria's eyes widened. Richard's voice rose. Shut up. Marcus opened the last page of the folder. A spreadsheet. Dates overlapping. Victoria's name aligned with two other women during the same week. Her breathing faltered. You said you were choosing me, she whispered to Richard. Richard didn't respond. The arrogance that had defined him when he walked into the house was gone. His shoulders sagged slightly. Victoria stared at the photos again. Different women. Different hotels. Different lies. But the same man. She wasn't special. She wasn't chosen. She was simply next. Richard swallowed hard, and for the first time since entering the house, his confidence fractured completely. Right there. Chapter 6, Folder 2 and 3. Debt and Crime. The room felt colder now. Not physically, but in the weight that pressed down on it. Victoria's eyes darted between Marcus, the monitors, and the folders laid neatly on the dining table. Richard shifted nervously beside her, adjusting his tie for the third time in a minute. Marcus picked up the second folder. Plain cream, like the first, but with a small red label stamped. Debt and liability. He opened it slowly, deliberately letting the silence build. Inside were pages of bank statements, transaction logs, and screenshots of online betting accounts. He slid the first sheet toward Richard. $700,000, Marcus said calmly. That's what you owe in gambling debts. Richard leaned over, trying to snatch the page. That's private business. None of this. Marcus held up a hand. Private? You're $700,000 in debt, owed to people who don't take kindly to failure. Private isn't the word I'd use. Victoria stared. Her confident smirk from earlier had vanished. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Marcus continued. The next pages were messages, text screenshots, WhatsApp notifications, emails, all threatening, urgent, aggressive. Pay up, or next time it won't be just your money. Consider this a warning. This isn't real, Richard stammered, glancing at Victoria for support. But she didn't speak. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. Marcus didn't stop there. He opened another section in folder 2. Transfers for Victoria's company accounts. Several substantial amounts had moved, quietly, late at night, always following Richard's gambling activity. She's been covering your losses, Marcus said, voice low but steady. Company funds. Money not hers to spend. You knew that, didn't you? Richard opened his mouth to respond, but the words faltered. His arrogance was gone. For the first time, the man realized he was a liability, not a threat. Victoria swallowed hard. I did it to help you. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Help you? His voice was measured, cutting through her justification. You embezzled millions, risked your career, your reputation, all for a man who would leave you the moment someone wealthier came along. And now you wonder why I'm calm. Richard's fists clenched. Marcus, that's enough. You can't, I can. Marcus interrupted, calm, unyielding. Because I planned for it. He slid the third folder across the table, folder 3. Financial crimes and evidence. Victoria froze. Marcus opened it carefully. Inside were forensic accounting reports, time-stamped security footage, printed bank transfers, and detailed records of unauthorized access to financial files. You accessed your company's accounts at night, Marcus said quietly. Moved funds into your personal accounts. Covered your co-workers' gambling debts. You created a paper trail so long it could wrap around the building twice. And you didn't consider I might notice? Victoria's hands rose to her face, covering her mouth. She trembled. Her eyes darted frantically across the pages, reading line after line, trying to rationalize, to deny. It's just numbers, she muttered weakly. Numbers that your firm already knows about. Marcus continued. They've been notified. Forensic reports were sent. Anonymous tips delivered. Your parents, major investors, already know. Her knees buckled slightly. She gripped the edge of the table, voice barely a whisper. No, they can't. They do, Marcus said softly, yet every word hit like steel. Richard took a step back. Wait. They know. About everything. Marcus glanced at him, calm, unwavering. Yes. Every transaction. Every late-night transfer. Every manipulated report. The authorities are aware. Your schemes are exposed. You're both ruined. Richard's face went pale. This isn't happening. It is, Marcus replied, standing slowly, surveying them both with the precision of a Marine trained to read threats and weaknesses. And it was never about shouting or fighting or losing control. It was about preparation. You made your moves. I anticipated them. And now, Victoria finally collapsed into the nearest chair, hands covering her face, shoulders shaking with sobs. All the composure she had wielded earlier, all the arrogance, all the false bravado gone. Richard's panic escalated. He began pacing, muttering under his breath, slamming his palms against the walls. This can't be. They can't know. We can fix this. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't intervene. He let the weight of their actions land where it belonged. The chaos in the room was theirs, not his. He picked up the remote for the shutters again, letting the metallic hum fill the space. Outside, the world remained unaware, but inside, everything had shifted. The predator became prey. The manipulator became powerless. Victoria's tears streaked her cheeks. She whispered into the floor. I didn't think I didn't know. Marcus's eyes remained calm, unwavering. He had seen the cracks forming for months, observed the patterns, and finally, everything had culminated here. Richard muttered angrily, shoving papers aside. You can't do this. You can't do it to me, Marcus said evenly. You tried, but I prepared, and now you're watching your world crumble. Victoria clutched her head, rocking slightly in the chair. I thought I was clever. I thought. Marcus didn't allow pity or pleading to distract him. He laid the last page of folder 3 on the table. A comprehensive timeline connecting embezzlement, transfers, and fraud. Your firm knows. Your parents know. Law enforcement knows. And in a few weeks, they'll act. You've left no gaps. No escape. Richard's confident smirk had vanished entirely. He opened his mouth to argue, to negotiate, to attempt control, but the words failed. The system had trapped them both. The arrogance, the manipulation, the lies, they all dissolved under the weight of preparation and truth. Victoria's shoulders slumped. Her strength was gone. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Marcus, please." He did not respond. Words were unnecessary. The evidence, the structure, the meticulous planning, it spoke louder than any shouting, any threats. Richard staggered toward the hallway, then froze. Marcus's gaze held him, panic etched into every line of his face. And in the silence that followed, only one thing remained. Marcus had orchestrated their complete destruction without raising a hand. Victoria collapsed emotionally. Richard panicked. Right there. Chapter 7, Public Exposure. The silence after the final revelation felt heavier than the steel shutters that sealed the house. Victoria stood motionless near the dining table, her mascara faintly smudged beneath eyes that no longer held arrogance, only shock. Richard had retreated 2 steps, as though physical distance might restore the authority he'd walked in with. Marcus looked at both of them calmly. Then he reached for the remote again. Victoria's head snapped up. "What are you doing now?" Marcus didn't answer. He pressed the button. The house responded with a deep mechanical hum. One by one, the steel shutters began to rise. Light filtered back into the room in thin silver blades before widening into full exposure. The outside world slowly reappeared through reinforced glass. Victoria squinted. Richard turned toward the windows instinctively, and then they both froze. The front lawn wasn't empty. It was crowded. Neighbors stood in clusters, at least 20 of them. Men in polos, women with folded arms, teenagers pretending not to stare, but filming openly with their phones. The neighborhood group chat had already been buzzing for nearly an hour. The noise, the shutters, the earlier raised voices. Someone had assumed to break in. Someone had called others to come watch. "What the hell?" Richard muttered. Marcus walked to the front door and unlocked it manually. The heavy door opened with deliberate calm. A wave of murmuring rolled across the yard. Tom Reynolds stood front and center, beer forgotten in his hand. "Marcus," he called cautiously. "Everything all right?" We heard. Marcus stepped aside slightly, allowing a full view into the living room. Victoria was still inside, disheveled, red dress wrinkled from tension. Richard stood behind her, jaw tight, clearly calculating escape. Tom's eyes widened slightly. Linda Harper leaned toward another neighbor and whispered something that spread like wildfire through the small crowd. Phones lifted higher. Recording. Victoria's breathing quickened. "Close the door," she hissed. Marcus didn't move. "You were expecting a show tonight," he said evenly, loud enough for those nearest the porch to hear. Richard stepped forward, trying to salvage authority. "This is private." Marcus glanced at him. "You stepped into my home." Tom cleared his throat. "Marcus, if this is domestic, we can leave." Marcus shook his head slightly. "No burglary," he said calmly. "Just clarity." Victoria's face drained. "Don't," she whispered. Marcus walked back inside, disappearing briefly down the hallway. Richard seized the moment. "I'm leaving." He strode toward the door, attempting to brush past Marcus as he returned. Marcus blocked him effortlessly with one solid step. "You're not done," Marcus said quietly. Richard lowered his voice. "You're embarrassing yourself." Marcus's expression didn't change. "No," he replied. He reached behind him and dragged 2 suitcases into the living room. Victoria's suitcases, already packed. Her eyes widened. "You went through my things?" "I organized them." He tossed the first suitcase toward the open doorway. It landed hard on the porch with a dull thud. A ripple of murmurs spread across the lawn. The second suitcase followed, then a garment bag, then a box of shoes. Victoria's hands trembled. "Marcus, stop." He didn't. Richard stepped back instinctively as Marcus returned once more and carried out a leather briefcase. Richard's. It hit the porch steps and tipped over, spilling papers. Phone zoomed in. Someone whispered, "That's the Johnson guy." Another voice said, "Tennis partner." Victoria stepped toward the door as if to gather her belongings, but she stopped when she realized every neighbor's eyes were locked on her. Some sympathetic, most not. Marcus stood beside her now, hands calm at his sides. "You told me tonight would be educational," he said softly enough for her alone. Tears welled in her eyes. "This isn't necessary." He looked toward the crowd, then back at her. "You wanted a show." The words carried clearly into the night air. A hush fell. Richard finally pushed forward. "Enough of this." He grabbed his briefcase from the porch, shoving loose papers back inside frantically. Tom Reynolds shook his head slowly. Linda crossed her arms. One of the younger neighbors muttered, "Unbelievable." Victoria stepped onto the porch carefully, heels unsteady. The red dress that had looked powerful earlier now looked theatrical, out of place under the white glare of phone flashlights. Richard avoided eye contact with everyone. Someone in the crowd started clapping. Slow, deliberate. One clap, then another. It wasn't celebratory. It was judgment. Within seconds, others joined in, measured, rhythmic applause echoing through the quiet suburban street. Victoria flinched as if each clap struck her physically. Richard's face burned crimson. "Let's go," he muttered harshly. Victoria bent to grab her suitcase, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the handle. Marcus stood in the doorway, framed by light from inside the house. Calm, unshaken, no shouting, no violence, just finality. Victoria looked up at him one last time. "This isn't over," she whispered. He held her gaze without emotion. "It is." Richard hurried down the walkway toward his car, nearly stumbling in his haste. Victoria followed, dragging her suitcase across the pavement as neighbors parted just enough to let them pass, but not enough to shield them from scrutiny. Phone cameras tracked their every step. Car door slammed. Engine roared. The silver Mercedes reversed too quickly, tires screeching slightly before straightening out and speeding down the street. The slow clapping faded gradually. Neighbors exchanged glances, murmuring. Tom stepped toward Marcus cautiously. "You all right?" Marcus nodded once. "Handled." Linda looked sympathetic. "I'm sorry." Marcus gave a small control nod. "Thank you for coming," he said evenly. The crowd began dispersing slowly. The spectacle concluded. Marcus stepped back inside his home. He closed the front door gently. The house was quiet again. The candles on the anniversary table had burned nearly to wax pools. The wine glasses remained untouched. Marcus walked to the wall panel and pressed the final button. The shutters lowered once more, sealing the house, sealing the moment. And outside, the streetlights flickered over the empty driveway where humiliation had just driven away. Right there. Chapter 8, The Fallout. The neighborhood returned to normal within days. Lawns were mowed. Mailboxes opened and closed. Kids rode bicycles past Marcus's driveway as if nothing historic had happened there. But the consequences had already been set in motion long before the public exposure. Marcus didn't make dramatic phone calls. He didn't threaten. He didn't chase. He simply waited. Victoria was fired 3 days later. Marcus found out the same way everyone else did, through a brief corporate press release issued by her firm. Internal audit irregularities. Violation of fiduciary responsibility. Immediate termination pending investigation. He read it once and set the tablet down. No reaction. An hour later, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered calmly. Marcus Blackwood. Silence on the other end. Then Victoria's voice, tight, brittle. "You did this." I provided information. You destroyed my career. No, he said evenly. You did. They're auditing everything. They froze my access. They're questioning me like I'm a criminal. There was a pause. You transferred company funds, Marcus replied. It was temporary. It was illegal. Her breathing quickened. You could have stopped this. I did. How? I warned you. The call ended abruptly. Marcus placed the phone down. He went back to reviewing blueprints for a commercial project in Denver. 2 weeks later, she was arrested. It wasn't dramatic. No high-speed chase. 2 detectives arrived at her temporary apartment mid-morning. White-collar crime division. Embezzlement charges. Wire fraud. Corporate theft exceeding $1 million. The news outlets picked it up quickly because of who her parents were. Major investors. Respected philanthropists. Their public statement was cold and precise. We are deeply disappointed. We do not condone illegal behavior. We support the justice system. No mention of their daughter by name. Marcus read that statement too. He felt nothing. The trial moved faster than Victoria expected. Forensic accounting records were airtight. Digital transfers traced. Email authorizations verified. Security footage time-stamped. Marcus wasn't required to testify extensively. Most of the evidence stood on its own. Preparation always beats performance. In court, Victoria tried to maintain composure. But when the sentencing came, her mask cracked. 3 years in state custody, the judge said firmly. Full restitution to the affected parties. Victoria's shoulders slumped as if someone had removed her spine. Marcus sat in the back row, silent. He didn't smirk. He didn't celebrate. He simply watched the consequences unfold. Richard's collapse was faster. When Victoria's investigation began, other husbands came forward. Other companies audited. The gambling debt surfaced publicly. $700,000 owed. The bookies didn't appreciate exposure. He was arrested on fraud-related charges within a month. Unlike Victoria, his arrest was messy. He tried to bluff through it. He tried to charm investigators. He failed. Then came the first assault. Outside a downtown parking garage. 2 men. Baseball bats. Broken ribs. Fractured wrist. No witnesses willing to testify. Marcus read about it in a short article buried beneath local headlines. Business consultant assaulted. He closed the tab and returned to work. Richard made bail. That lasted 6 weeks. Then he ran, missed a court appearance, attempted to cross state lines. He was caught in a roadside motel 3 states over. Disheveled, panicked, arrested again. This time, bail was denied. In jail, his arrogance evaporated quickly. Corporate confidence didn't translate inside concrete walls. There were fights. One left him with a split lip and stitches above his eye. Another resulted in a cracked cheekbone. He tried to align himself with people who could protect him. But gamblers who owe money are liabilities. Eventually, prison administration moved him to protective custody. Isolation. Minimal privileges. No audience to impress. Marcus never made a public statement. Reporters tried once. He declined politely. I'm focused on my business, he said simply. And he was. His company expanded into 2 additional states within a year. Investors trusted him more now. He'd proven something not just about competence, but about composure. At industry conferences, whispers followed him. That's the guy who exposed the embezzlement. He handled it without losing control. Respect, not scandal. Victoria wrote him once from jail. The letter arrived folded, the ink slightly smeared. You could have saved me. He read that line twice. Then he placed the letter back in the envelope. He did not respond. Another letter came weeks later. My parents won't visit. You know them. They care about image. Marcus stared at the words for a long time. Then he returned the letter unopened. Not vindicatively, just decisively. Richard's name surfaced again when court proceedings finalized. Fraud convictions. Financial misconduct. Additional civil suits from other victims. Sentencing included prison time. Longer than Victoria's. Marcus heard through mutual acquaintances that Richard had been involved in multiple altercations inside. Lost weight. Lost influence. Lost everything he once flaunted. He ended up exactly where arrogance leads when it outruns intelligence. One evening, nearly a year after the anniversary night, Marcus sat alone in his living room. The house was quiet, ordered, restored. The shutters remained installed, but unused now. He looked around the space where humiliation had once attempted to take root. He hadn't lifted a fist. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't chased revenge. He had simply prepared. Victoria lost her career, her freedom, her reputation. Richard lost his illusion of superiority, his money, his safety. Marcus lost nothing, because he had acted before emotion could weaken him. Preparation, documentation, timing. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful street beyond. The world hadn't ended. It had corrected itself, and he had never needed to throw a single punch to win. Chapter 9, The Rebuild. The house felt different once the silence settled into something permanent. Not empty, clean. Marcus believed in rebuilding the way he believed in demolition, precisely, with purpose. You don't repair cracked foundations. You reinforce or you replace. Within 6 months of the fallout, Blackwood Construction secured 2 major contracts outside the state line. One in Colorado, one in Texas. What began as a regional operation expanded into a multi-state enterprise. Marcus spent more time in airports than he ever had in courtrooms. "Congratulations," his operations manager said during a strategy meeting. "You're officially a multi-state corporation now." Marcus nodded once. "Then act like it. No chest thumping. No celebratory champagne. Just execution." But word traveled beyond construction sites. Corporate executives, particularly those shaken by internal fraud scandals, started calling. "How did you catch it?" one CEO asked during a private lunch meeting. "I didn't catch it," Marcus replied evenly. "I prepared for it." That answer alone earned him consulting contracts. He began advising companies on internal security systems, risk management, and executive-level oversight, surveillance integration, digital audit trails, red flag behavioral patterns. The same principles that had exposed betrayal in his home now protected boardrooms. People underestimate patterns, Marcus would say during presentations. Patterns don't lie. Emotions do. His reputation strengthened not because he was ruthless, but because he was disciplined. And discipline commands respect. He met Hannah at a veterans fundraiser. It wasn't dramatic. No cinematic moment. She was standing near a quiet table, reviewing paperwork for a foundation supporting military families. Dark hair tied back simply. Calm eyes. No performance. Marcus noticed she didn't try to be noticed. He approached without rehearsed charm. "Marcus Blackwood," he said, offering his hand. "Hannah Reeves," she replied firmly. Her handshake was steady. "You served?" she asked. "Marines." She nodded. "My husband was Army." Past tense. Marcus didn't pry. "I'm sorry," he said simply. She appreciated that he didn't ask how or when. They spoke for 20 minutes about logistics, about resource distribution for veterans, about inefficiencies in charity management. Practical conversation. No flirtation. No ego. When the event ended, he asked, "Coffee sometime?" She considered him carefully. "Coffee," she agreed. It wasn't fast. They met twice before Marcus even mentioned anything personal. On the third meeting, she asked directly, "Why did your marriage end?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Betrayal," he answered calmly. She studied his face, searching for bitterness. She didn't find it. "You still angry?" she asked. "No, you sure?" "Yes." She nodded once. "Good." They moved slowly, respectfully. Marcus didn't attempt to impress her with wealth. Hannah wasn't drawn to flash. She had lived through loss. Stability mattered more than status. She had a daughter, 8 years old, quiet, observant. Marcus didn't rush into that dynamic either. He met the child months later, in a park, casual and intentional. "What do you build?" the little girl asked him bluntly. "Homes," Marcus replied. She looked up at him thoughtfully. "Can you build tree houses?" He smiled slightly. "Better than most." That was the first time she grinned at him. Tom did what time does when not sabotaged by ego. It strengthened what was steady. 2 years after the anniversary night that had ended everything, Marcus stood at a different altar. Smaller ceremony. No spectacle. Hannah wore white, not dramatic, just elegant. Marcus didn't need fireworks. He needed peace. When the officiant asked if he took her as his wife, his answer was simple. Yes. No grand vows. Just certainty. They moved into a larger home the following year. Not to escape the old house, but because growth required space. Marcus designed it himself. Wide windows, reinforced security, not because of paranoia, but because structure mattered. Hannah chose the interior finishes. Warm tones, comfortable spaces. The little girl, now calling him Marcus at first, eventually Dad by choice, helped plan the backyard. Yes, he told her one afternoon, blueprint rolled out across the kitchen island. We're building the treehouse. She threw her arms around him without hesitation. He froze for half a second, then returned the embrace. The neighborhood watched and remembered, but not the scandal, the composure. 3 summers after the exposure night, Marcus hosted the first of what became annual barbecues. Same lawn, same driveway, but different atmosphere. Hannah carried trays of food with quiet grace. The little girl ran through sprinklers with other children. Tom Reynolds approached Marcus with a beer in hand. Good to see you smiling more, Tom said. Marcus glanced at Hannah across the yard. I was always smiling, he replied calmly. Tom chuckled. Not like that. Linda Harper joined them. We're glad you stayed, she said softly. Marcus nodded. This is home. And it was. Neighbors respected him not because he had destroyed anyone, but because he had refused to be destroyed. Business associates respected him because he brought order into chaos. Hannah respected him because he didn't carry ghosts into the present. And the little girl respected him because he showed up. Every day. No theatrics. Just consistency. As evening settled over the barbecue, Marcus stood near the grill once more, flipping ribs with the same measured precision as years ago. But this time, there was no fracture beneath the surface. No simmering humiliation. Just quiet strength. Hannah stepped beside him, resting her hand lightly against his back. Everything okay? She asked softly. He looked over the yard, the laughter, the lights, the stability. Yes, he said. The community didn't see scandal when they looked at Marcus Blackwood anymore. They saw resilience. They saw leadership. They saw a man who rebuilt instead of retaliated blindly. And they respected him more than ever. Right there. Chapter 10, 5 years later. The sun rose gently over the quiet suburban street, illuminating manicured lawns and the familiar hum of morning traffic. Marcus Blackwood sipped coffee on the back porch of his larger home, the aroma of fresh roast filling the air. He watched as Hannah's daughter, now taller, more confident, still bursting with curiosity, tossed a frisbee across the yard. It had been 5 years since the night that changed everything. 5 years since the confrontation that had ended Victoria's manipulation and Richard's arrogance. 5 years in which patience, planning, and composure had proven stronger than rage. Marcus didn't flinch at memories. They were part of the blueprint he had built his life on. He had never needed to strike a fist. The evidence, timing, and a calculated reveal had done the work for him. Across the country, Victoria's life had not improved. Her letters arrived sporadically, handwritten, typed, desperate pleas for help. Marcus picked one up from the stack, sitting unopened in his study once a month, reading the inked words briefly before setting them back down. I've changed. I need help. My parents won't support me. Please, he didn't respond. He never would. The parole board had denied her release multiple times. Her schemes, small cons, and manipulations to gain advantage in retail positions had failed repeatedly. Every attempt to claw back wealth or influence ended in failure. Her pride, once so sharp, had been eroded by her own repeated mistakes. He remembered her once boasting that she had power over him because of his silence, because of his perceived vulnerability. Yet 5 years later, she was merely a cautionary tale. Marcus didn't feel glee. He felt closure. Richard fared no better. Prison fights had left him disfigured. Scars across his face, broken ribs, bruises and stitches, each a permanent reminder of his arrogance. He was still in debt to multiple gambling rings and loan sharks. Every attempt at a new scheme ended in failure, his reputation destroyed beyond repair. The man who once strutted into Marcus's house, believing he could teach him a lesson, was now a shadow, confined by both walls and consequence. Marcus's phone buzzed briefly with a work notification. Another successful contract signed. Another client impressed with his meticulous security consulting. It was a different life now, one of influence without drama, leadership without confrontation, and respect without fear. Hannah approached him, holding a tray of breakfast. She sat on the small table beside him. "You're quiet this morning," she said softly. Marcus smiled faintly, looking out at the yard where his stepdaughter was laughing with the neighbor kids. "Just thinking," he replied. "It's been a long time." Hannah sat down beside him, her hand brushing his. "And it's paid off," she said. "You've built something real." He glanced at her. Patience, planning, preparation. That's all it ever was. "Not everyone has the discipline for that," she replied. Marcus tilted his head, watching the sunlight dance across the porch floor. Discipline doesn't guarantee success, but it guarantees that when the world tests you, you don't lose yourself. Across town, Victoria struggled to keep a retail job she barely tolerated. The letters she sent, requests for money, excuses for past mistakes, subtle manipulations, arrived unopened at Marcus's door. Each failure reinforced the lesson he had quietly imposed. Consequence always follows arrogance. Richard, meanwhile, had been moved to protective custody after one particularly brutal altercation. He spent his days under surveillance, monitored constantly, still scheming quietly, but failing. Marcus had heard of it indirectly through news feeds and mutual acquaintances. There was a certain satisfaction in knowing that his preparation had not only worked but lasted. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the coffee steaming between his hands. His stepdaughter ran over, waving the frisbee. "Dad, can we play?" He smiled fully this time, rising from the porch. "Absolutely. Let's see if you've improved your aim." The yard filled with laughter. Hannah joined in, careful not to interfere, but present enough to guide. Marcus marveled at how different it felt from the tension of years past. No schemes, no betrayals, no humiliation. Only life, simple, solid, and earned. Later, when the sun began its descent, he stood at the window watching the neighborhood kids play. A few neighbors waved from across the street. The community had long forgotten the scandal that once gripped it. All they remembered was Marcus's calm, his composure, and the quiet strength he carried every day. Hannah came to stand beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about them?" she asked, nodding subtly toward the past, the letters, the news clippings, the files still locked in the cabinet. Marcus shook his head slightly, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "not because it matters anymore, but because it's a reminder. People get exactly what they deserve when you let them." "And you didn't have to do a thing?" she asked, incredulous. "Nothing," he replied. "I just prepared and watched." The words seemed to settle in the air. The lesson of those years wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about precision, timing, and self-control. At dinner that evening, Marcus sat with Hannah and his stepdaughter. They spoke of school, work, and plans for the weekend. Laughter punctuated the conversation. Marcus felt a quiet pride in his family, earned, not taken. Later, when he stepped outside to check the mailbox, the air was crisp. He looked down the street where his house stood firm, protected not only by structure, but by the integrity he carried within it. Somewhere far away, Victoria struggled to understand why her schemes failed. Somewhere else, Richard counted the cost of his arrogance behind prison walls. Both men and women who had once threatened Marcus's life of peace were now nothing but shadows of consequence. Marcus returned to the porch, the final piece of the day settling into place. Hannah sat beside him, reading quietly. His stepdaughter had fallen asleep on the sofa. All was calm, and Marcus finally allowed himself a long, measured exhale. Because the truth had endured. The lesson had been delivered without a single raised fist, without shouting, without public vindictiveness. Sometimes, the quietest victories were the most complete. He looked at Hannah, then at the sleeping girl, then at the street beyond, and he thought about all that had passed. And in that stillness, Marcus Blackwood whispered to himself, knowing it was the only acknowledgement necessary. Sometimes the best revenge isn't violence. It's letting people destroy themselves while everyone watches.